Hi everyone, how are you guys? Played the wrong song there, sorry. Hope everyone's doing well. There we go. Sorry, it wouldn't be right without StreamYard confusing me. To start off with, right? How is everyone doing? Hey. Hi, Kib Kitty. Okay, so I'm gonna get to chat and say hello to everyone, but I wanted to first ask you guys. I know that Savannah Guthrie put out a message for Easter yesterday, and I wanted to know how many of you guys have seen that. We're gonna watch it at the end of this, because we're doing the Megyn Kelly Investigate series today, so I'm really excited about that. But if you've seen it or not seen it, let me know. Let me know in chat. I'd like to know who's watched it and what you guys think so far. So let's see who's here. Good morning, Kid Kitty and Smoky Cat. Good morning, Miriam and Christine. And CJ. Hi, CJ. Eileen. You read it online. I didn't even know you could do that. Yeah, so it was kind of crazy. Like, I have to say, like, we're gonna watch it, so I don't wanna get into it too much, like, before we start. But I have to say, like, it was, like, in context of what she's been going through, it was difficult to watch. But I guess it's also, like, it does show her faith in all of this. So we'll get into it. But continue to let me know in chat if you have or haven't seen it. I'm interested to know. All right, so you guys know we're going to go through the Megyn Kelly Investigates. That's not supposed to do that. Sorry, guys. There we go. So we're going to be going through this episode of Megyn Kelly's, and I know that it has actually already been covered. I just realized that, but it wasn't covered with me. So since we're going to be doing like the whole series of Megyn Kelly stuff, I want to just make sure that we do actually start at number 1. So, and I haven't really properly watched it, and it was a while ago, so you guys might not remember, and we'll see what we can add. All right, so I'm going to start by just posting the link to this video. It is from Megyn Kelly. I hope that all fits. Does not all fit. We'll fix that just now. All right. Oh, you saw that, Smoky Cat? Yeah. So she has 2 guests in this episode, and they're really good. I've kind of looked at the beginning of it, and I can already see that there's some like super interesting points. And even though we know a lot more by now, since this went out, it's still valuable in hindsight. So let me know if there's any audio issues, if you guys can't hear. I'm going to put this on 1.1 speed just because it is a really long video. Let me know if you can't hear it properly or anything like that.
Hey everyone, I'm Megyn Kelly. Welcome to the Megyn Kelly Show. It has now been 44 days since Nancy Guthrie's mysterious disappearance, under circumstances investigators are still struggling to fully explain. Early statements from law enforcement were confusing, key details shifted, and a timeline that should have clarified the case has only fueled more questions. Today, we begin a 4-part series into all of the outstanding questions and theories surrounding Nancy's disappearance. What happened inside of that house? Why did investigators release the crime scene so early? What can we determine by the splatters of blood left behind? And how many people might actually be involved in Nancy's disappearance? ABC News is now reporting, citing sources briefed on the investigation, that the FBI has recovered additional imagery from the cameras at Nancy's home. It's reporting that the images were recovered in recent weeks from motion-activated cameras trained on the swimming pool, the backyard, and the side yard. Investigators apparently not recovering video footage, but instead thumbnail images captured when the cameras were triggered by motion. The source is telling ABC News that investigators were able to observe several people in the back and the side yards over an unspecified period prior to the abduction, but the cameras captured nothing on the night of the abduction, which one source describes as odd. Before we dive into that new information, here is a look back at how this case first captured the nation's attention. There is a very disturbing situation out of Arizona involving the mother of NBC News anchor Savannah Guthrie.
This is Today with Savannah Guthrie.
We want to get right to what is a deeply personal story for us. Savannah's beloved mother has been reported missing in Arizona.
This is shocking.
We saw some things at the home that were concerning to us, that we do in fact have a crime scene, that we do in fact have a crime.
The sheriff said, "We believe she did not leave of her own volition, that she left behind her keys, her ID, her purse, her phone, everything." I mean, now no 84-year-old woman leaves the house without her purse. This sounds about as serious as it can get.
They seem pretty sure that a crime took place. We don't know what that information is yet. It's a race against the clock. Older people with dementia wander off, but they've been very affirmative that she was mentally sound, and this is really bad.
Her meds are vital. I can't stress that enough. You know, it's been better than 24 hours, and the family tells us if she doesn't have those meds, it can become fatal.
It says all the scary components of cases that don't end well.
You know, it's happened before. The police, the sheriff is, this person's dead, and this, that, and then I see, some hospital calls and says, "Hey, I think I've got this lady in my hospital room." So, we're never going to give up hope.
Good morning. This is our timeline that we have been able to develop. About 5:32 p.m., Nancy travels to her local family's home for dinner and playing games with the family. At 9:48 p.m., Nancy was dropped off at home, and we know that because we have the garage door open. At 9:50 p.m., that garage door closes. But it's that time we assume that Nancy's home. Sunday morning, early morning, at 1:47 a.m.,
Sorry, I just want to stop it for 1 sec. And I'm not going to interrupt this too much because I know that's kind of irritating. But I never really caught that before, that he said that they assumed that she was home and it was because of the garage door. Like, I kind of thought that maybe that was initially based on the person dropping her off saying, like, she went home. So that is interesting. It does kind of make you think, like, maybe they didn't really watch her go in the door. I don't know. Yeah. Let me know what you think. And hello to everyone coming in. Happy Easter. Thank you for joining.
doorbell camera disconnects. At 2:12 a.m., software detects a person on a camera, but there's no video available. They had no subscription, and therefore it would rewrite itself. It just kind of loops, right, and covers up. But we're not giving up on that. 2:28, Nancy's pacemaker app shows that it was a disconnect from the phone. And at 11:56 a.m., the family checks on Nancy and discovers her missing. And at 12:03 p.m., 911 is called in to the Butte County Sheriff's Department.
Subject's last name will be Guthrie, first of Nancy, the 84-year-old white female. Subject is nowhere to be found. Subject suffers from limited mobility and has medication scheduled to follow up, and needs daily.
This case is bizarre and disturbing. Law enforcement sources telling the Los Angeles Times that blood was found inside of her Arizona home alongside signs of forced entry, prompting detectives to investigate what they now describe as a, quote, possible kidnapping or abduction. Blood drops were also found leading from the entryway outside down the house's pathway toward the driveway.
My mom is up early in Tucson, Arizona. Nancy Guthrie
This
joins
poor
us.
woman. There she was, more vibrant, 13 years ago.
Hi, Savannah. She is here to share one of her famous dinners.
Prior to this, nobody ever thought their mom could be potentially endangered. It was just, this is a whole new kind of crime.
Already in heaven.
It's already great.
Oh, they're already loving it.
I mean, I have to say, that's the thing about these morning shows and having been at the Today Show for a year.
I grew up in the 70s, okay, in Arizona. My mom was like, go out and play. I'll see you at dinner time.
They really want you to put your personal life on the air.
There is no place like
The
home.
Daily Mail is reporting that some at NBC are worried about this segment.
I come here every time I come home.
Savannah returning to her hometown of Tucson and being with her mother.
What made you want to stay in Tucson and plant roots?
It's so wonderful. Just the air, the quality of life is laid back.
Now what they report in the Daily Mail is that there's a lot of soul searching at NBC about whether their segment made Nancy a target.
The best thing about Tucson is coming home and
Yes.
seeing you guys.
I mean, what are the odds that this is just some caper where they've kidnapped an 84-year-old woman who just so happens to be the mother of one of the biggest news stars in America?
She was like the 12th member of the cast or what?
Savannah's mom.
That does not track to me.
Well, in law enforcement, we don't believe in coincidences, and I don't believe in the coincidence either.
We are ready to talk.
A major development last night when we heard from Savannah and her siblings. In a nearly 4-minute video filmed on a couch seated together, Savannah pleads for her mother's return and addresses the reports of a ransom letter.
We need to know, without a doubt, that she is alive and that you have her.
We're going to go to someone who's been on the ground in Arizona getting scoop after scoop, and that's News Nation's Brian Enden.
What is in the ransom notes is that there is specific information about what Nancy Guthrie was wearing, and also specific information about details from inside the house that apparently only someone would know who was inside the house. What I don't know is if any of that information is correct.
It was stunning to watch.
Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Virtually everyone in this country has seen Savannah Guthrie looking directly into camera.
Our mom is our heart and our home.
And this was so different. I mean, she looked
Her health. Her
exhausted. I'll bet she said absolutely no sleep. How would you fall asleep at night when you didn't know whether your mom was alive or dead, whether she was in the custody of bad guys who wanted to hurt her, when you'd seen what we believe was her blood outside of her home, when you know she doesn't have access to her medication that she needs? I mean, you could see that wear and tear on Savannah's face, and you just wanted to reach out and try to make it better for her. It was very jarring.
Everyone is looking for you, Mommy. Everyone.
It's chill.
Okay, so that was a really good background to the case. Like, that was very well done and put together, I must say. And also, look, E-Rich. I understand what you're saying when it comes to, how many people are missing all over the country and the world. And we can talk about that. We can address it. I think, look, you can't really hold it against anyone that this case is getting all of that attention. I think that's kind of how human nature works, and it's such a tragic story that is how it goes. But at the same time, I do understand what you're saying. It's sad. It's sad, and it happens with a lot of high-profile cases. We do forget about the others. But I think it's also important, that's why the Guthrie family has made certain, additional donations. And I think that's good of them, and it's them kind of acknowledging that. So, yeah. But let's carry on. Like I said, background there was really good. And now we're going to listen to her guests.
Just to get the oversight again. I mean, you guys know what happened in this case, but just to see it all together like that, just such a jarring series of events. Joining me now to dive into the story, Jim Fitzgerald. Fitz, he's a former FBI supervisory special agent and a forensic linguist, along with co-host of the Cold Red podcast, and Maureen O'Connell, 25-year veteran of the FBI and co-host of Best Case, Worst Case. Don't miss a moment. Subscribe to this show on YouTube and CVS and Walgreens. Fitz, Maureen, great to see you both. Thanks for joining us. There's a lot of places we could go with this, but let's just start back at the initial crime scene. Let's say you get brought in on this case this week and Sheriff Nano says, we finally got to the best ones and we want your analysis of how we can go back and start over so that we can get some real clues and make sure we didn't miss anything. Where do you start, Fitz?
Well, in an ideal scenario, and what I'm about to say is not casting aspersions or making anyone sound guilty, but as soon as we realized that Mrs. Guthrie was missing by force, didn't walk off on her own, I would want to completely separate all of the family members and interview them separately. And again, I'm not saying one of them had anything to do with this directly, but indirectly, we don't know. A friend of a friend, they put some information out. And that way they could be assured from the very beginning that the story lined up with what exact time Nancy was dropped off that night, who drove her. There's been some of the anecdotes are going back and forth in terms of who was in the car that night when she was dropped off, the garage door open, did they walk her in or not? So it would have been nice and ideal. And this is what they teach you, of course, in the police academy. Separate everyone as soon as you can. Doesn't mean they're suspects, doesn't mean they're bad guys, but this way there's no question there's not going to be leakage or some sort of a permeation of the particular story from one person to another. It's their own memory recalling to the investigators what happened. So that's investigative interviewing 101. And I'm not sure if that happened. Something tells me they were all sitting on the couch in someone's living room. Well, the last time we saw her was this, and they're going back and forth. And that even includes the older child.
I think that's probably what happened. I mean, honestly, like we were just recently talking about how they didn't approach this necessarily like a homicide and maybe not even like a serious crime, right? Like I tend to agree with him. Like I'm pretty sure that they didn't do it like that where everybody was separated out and interviewed formally. Yeah, look, the police went there with the attitude that she walked off or wandered off.
And perhaps that person would have known something. So ideally speaking, that's the first thing I would have want to have done. I hope they did that later that day or certainly by the next day, that division, so to speak.
That's true, Maureen, because if you walk in and just assume that everybody you're looking at is a victim, you're making a basic mistake in law enforcement, right? Shouldn't the instinct be, as soft a heart as you may have, that everyone is a suspect until you have a suspect in custody?
Yes, so much of law enforcement goes against what you would do in a normal situation as a member of the public. We have to ask real hard questions. We have to make it as comfortable as possible, and then there are times where it has to go to a totally different level where you don't care how uncomfortable someone is. However, in a situation like this, I would absolutely agree with Fitz. I would also say that if we were taking this case over today, they already gave up the crime scene so early, but my focus would have been on the house. I'm not necessarily judging them at all initially because it did look like a walk away. And there are a lot of people that walk away from their home and sprain their ankle and they're stuck in a ditch or whatever. And being 84 without her medication, she could have almost been unconscious at that time. But once they saw the blood on the front porch, she wasn't there. They searched around the area. They couldn't find her. It's time to expand. Your investigative priorities become expanding the crime scene, roping the whole thing off, doing everything you can with DNA, touch DNA, fibers, hairs, all that kind of stuff. And if the FBI ever offers to have the ERT team work your crime scene, for the love of all that's holy, just say yes.
Right? So just say yes. It doesn't matter what issues you have. It doesn't matter what's going on, whether you have a friend in Florida or whatever. Just say yes. It's true. To turn down that level of resources, I don't know.
Because most crime scene teams have 2 or 3 people on them. And crime scene work is arduous work. It's hard labor oftentimes. But when you have 25 people that you can throw at a crime scene, and they're all specialized in some way, shape, or form, it really makes things work a lot better.
I've been dying to ask you two about the video that we uncovered of Nancy's bedroom. We aired this last week, and it was from 2013, and we found it just because we were preparing for this series. So we did a deep dive into the archives of the Today Show, and we found video for the first time of Nancy's bedroom. And I mean, you were part of that evidence response team at the FBI, Maureen. So I've been dying to get your thoughts on what we see in this video. Let's watch it.
My mom is up early in Tucson, Arizona. Nancy Guthrie joins us now. Hi, Mom. Good morning.
Hi, Savannah.
Well,
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Mom. I see that you've already made your bed, even though it's 3 a.m. there or whatever. Mom, why was this an important skill to teach me?
Well, I think everybody needs to know how to make a bed. And so when the time came to teach you guys how to make a bed, this is what I tried to teach you.
Now,
anyway.
This is not just your standard bed making. This is the hospital corners bed making. We're talking you can bounce a quarter off of it, right, Nancy?
Natalie, don't put me to the test. It's way too early.
She's backing off. Nancy, I just want to know how difficult Savannah was when you tried to teach her this. How much screaming and stomping her feet was involved?
All three of the kids thought it was a really worthless skill.
Oh, all right, so Mom, first you show everybody how to do it, okay? And then you can judge how we do it.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. Well, basically, since my bed's already made, the most important thing you have to do is to make sure this top sheet is really pulled in here tightly, because that's going to give you your smooth corner.
And tuck under.
Then you pull this over, and you make kind of like a triangle.
I remember
your top
Don't
sheet.
get started yet.
And then,
I'm not getting started. When do you
and
make
then
the
you tuck it
triangle?
under as tightly as you can. But here's the little skill.
Okay, how many of you guys do that? Do you make a triangle and then you like tuck it under? I genuinely want to know. Like, let me know if you do that, because now I feel like my skills in making the bed are inadequate, and I thought I was a compulsive bed maker. Let me know.
See this nice corner?
Yeah.
You want to make sure that's as tight as can be.
Okay.
Tuck it in.
And you keep cookies in
Then when you sleep, there you go.
And then
So
Mom,
when you sleep in the middle of the night, it doesn't pull out.
All right.
That's because
Oh, there.
for
That's
David,
all
this
right.
would be
He's
a
pulling
toy
it up.
bed.
That's good.
That's the
There you
problem.
go.
Mom, thank you so much. It's so good to see you. Thanks for coming on the show. I know it's
What is
early
this
there.
doing?
Honey.
Cool now too.
Thank
It's really
you,
early.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Maureen, so there's so much, right? And it's like, isn't it shocking to see the inside of her bedroom where we know she would be stolen from, these years later? When we saw the tape, it was just, she's been in the same house since 1991. So I don't know if she'd redecorated since then, but there it is. It doesn't look like a particularly spacious room. Maureen, what were your thoughts when you saw it?
Well, I looked at some things that I thought would be part of a ransom note. For example, that wardrobe piece of furniture off to the left, where a gentleman would hang his sport coat for the next night and the shoes go in the bottom. It's got a little thing generally for like cufflinks or whatever. It's an old time, very distinctive piece of furniture that a lot of people don't necessarily have anymore. So they could have used that as something where they're like, whoa, this is legit because she has this thing, and it's not something a lot of people have. Who would know she had this in her room? We would also, they could have described that very distinctive headboard, which is almost Spanish in style. And, like a lot of people, my mom never changed her bedroom furniture after our dad passed away.
Just correct me, but this video was publicly available, right? So, I'm not misunderstanding that. Like whoever wrote the ransom note, whether they were in the room or not, they could have watched this video. It's from the Today Show. I'm just checking, but yeah, that's what I understand.
Who does? You get comfortable.
My
with
mom
as
hasn't
we
changed
age,
a thing in her house, and I don't know how many decades. She likes it the way she likes it.
Yeah. And they're just comfortable. And it's the way, and if you were in a loving marriage, like your mom, my mom and dad, when my dad passed away, she didn't want to change anything. She wanted it to remain the same, and it stayed the exact same until she sold the house. So, there's a lot of stuff in there that someone could have used nefariously in one of those ransom notes to, in order to get the authorities to believe them.
Mm-hmm. What did you think when you saw it, Fitz?
I put my behavioral cap on upon seeing it. And just right now, Megyn, is the first time I watched that video. And, a lot of celebrities out there, a lot of on-air personalities have mothers, have loved ones. But Savannah really took it to the next level in showcasing her mother. And these are very human, very emotional, and they're very moving sort of little segments she put together. And it just has me thinking, if you are, in fact, someone out there suffering from some condition like erotomania. You're basically a stalker. Again, I don't think this was ever about money. What is more valuable to Savannah, to someone like her, that you may have some sort of a fixation or obsession about? And maybe you can't get to her kids. You don't want to mess with people that young. Boy, and this mother happens to live in sort of a remote area with neighbors far away. And look how much she means to Savannah. And boy, I feel like I know her mother as well as I know Savannah from watching her on TV every day. Let me go pay a visit and let me go do something with this. I can't say I'm locking into this theory, but this didn't happen in a vacuum. There's been emails to Savannah over the years, maybe going as far back as when Mom, did the bedroom interview. So I can't imagine that this personal connection between this personality on the air and the fondness and the connection and the closeness she had to her mother weren't interrelated. I'm not blaming Savannah for anything here. She had every right to put her mother on the air. She loved her mother. Mother loved her daughter. But could this somehow be a person or persons out there who didn't have that relationship with their own mother, wanted something with Savannah, couldn't get to Savannah or kids, so they chose her own mother as some sort of a Freudian substitute? We can really get carried away there. But I have no doubt that the person who abducted Nancy Guthrie is familiar with all these types of videos we've just seen. They may even have like a trophy reel they can play over and over again. And therefore, with Savannah not being a prime target or an available target or readily available, they go after her mom.
Okay, that's interesting, because when we talked about that, like on previous shows and stuff, I said that I thought it wasn't likely, because I figured that if this was about Savannah, then the perpetrator would have reached out to her instead of, either remaining quiet, which we think they did, or possibly reaching out to TMZ, which, I personally don't believe is a real note. But, what he's saying is kind of interesting. I don't know. Like, I know that a lot of people feel this is about Savannah, and he's saying that with the way that her mom and her relationship with her mom was so showcased so publicly, like, he doesn't feel that that's unrelated. But I don't know. I feel like it is still possible that it was a crime of opportunity that went wrong. Let me know what you think. But I feel like if Nancy Guthrie was surveyed enough before, and her routine and her security was, they were able to analyze that, I do think it could be a coincidence. But he still makes a really good point. He might change my mind. Let me know what you guys think as well.
To me, it was one of the things that was creepy about the video in retrospect, not, in the moment, was that it was a very small space between what I assume is her side of the bed. The bedside table was right there with her books on it, and the wall. Like, this intruder, if he came in there and actually did grab her from her bed, as Savannah said, he had to squeeze in there, and he would have been right on top of her. He would have been right over her. And how we heard she had pretty powerful hearing aids. It just doesn't seem like that would have been an issue at all. Seems like rather close quarters, where he would have been able to get right up on her next to the bed in a rather small space and order her out. It's so scary to think about, and not a lot of room to maneuver, because she had quite a few furniture pieces in that one little corner of her bedroom. That's where we believe the crime took place, according to Savannah. And it's just eerie to see it up close and personal. Don't show your mom's bedroom on TV. This is something a lot of people would not have done it. I blame the Today Show. I've got to be honest, you guys. I've said this before, but there is pressure on you. I was there for just a year. There is pressure to show all of your intimate details. Your family, your children. They insisted. They really wanted my children on the air, and finally, I relented. But I insisted that they blur all their faces. Like, we did a camping spot with my family.
They wanted her children on. Okay. It's interesting. Look, I don't know. I wouldn't be okay with that. She's saying that there's pressure. I don't know if that's true, but it's pretty serious if there is. They shouldn't feel pressure to have to do that just for work.
And I was the only one who had their children's faces blurred. I'm like, do not show anything that's identifying about my kids. But they're so desperate to show the audience, like, see, it's just one big happy family, and you need to love all of our anchors who are family, women, and men. And like, I knew with my kids that this would be endangering. I confess, even with my mom, who did wind up on my show at NBC, didn't even think about it, Fitz. Didn't even consider like your mom as a potential source of danger, because much in the way like. This is like a new invention. It's like a new way of thinking of how to hurt a public figure. It's one of the many downsides of this horrible case.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to the bedroom scene. You can be the toughest MMA fighter, Navy SEAL, trained FBI, SWAT person, all those things. You're sound asleep in REM, rapid eye movement, and you open up and there's a masked man with that kind of look that we see on the video standing over top you. You know, you're going to panic, and some will turn over and hide, and some will pull the pillow over. Some may get up and fight, but that person definitely has an advantage over you. An 84-year-old woman, you know, without her hearing aids in, and you know, who knows what her med level was even at that night. So that had to be the most scary moment for her. But yeah, the whole family thing. I mean, I've interviewed stalkers. I've worked these type cases, and a lot of them had to do with on-air female personalities, such as yourself, Megyn, over the years, especially with NBC. I was in New York, and I had a direct pipeline to their director of security, and Ann Curry and a number of others were getting threats all the time, and we had to go out and send leads to other parts of the country. And so it's one thing interpersonal, looking at the screen and seeing your object of obsession, but then they bring in mothers and perhaps children, and kudos to you for at least blurring out their faces on your particular segment that you talked about, Megyn. But and it becomes all that more personal, and I just can't rule out that there's someone out there, because everything else doesn't make sense about this case. Obviously, it's not money oriented, et cetera.
That is true.
To have some sort of an obsession with Savannah, and then now be almost like you're part of her family, and you know, the blood takes away from that, as if Nancy was injured, but because she may have put up a fight of some sort. But you know, this person may have just wanted to have part of Savannah with him for however long, a few hours, a few days, or weeks. And that's just coming more and more of a possibility as I see it. And these videos over the years, no fault of Savannah. You can blame it on NBC if you want, but it's certainly a person who's already predisposed to aberrant behavior and plotting something like this. He may have seen this thing live, and I forget what you said, this bedroom thing was 10 or 12 years ago. You know, he may have seen this live, and the fantasies started then. And I said, oh, I love Savannah so much. I want to meet her mother too. Who knows? There could have been a knock at the door over the years, and you know, no one made anything of it. And I have no doubt that there's been some interaction on this person's part prior. Exactly what it was with other family members, we don't know. Emails, but it's going to be there, and that's what investigators have to look for and search for. And these videos, unfortunately, didn't help. And I think other anchors and news personalities, such as yourself, you know this already, but leave the family out of it, and even mention them as minimally as necessary.
Yeah. Okay. So like, I mean, I agree. It's through no fault of Savannah. I mean, they want to say that they blame the show. I don't know anything about that, but I think, yeah, he's making a good point in the sense that, like, I guess when you're putting information out there, you don't really know who's seeing it, right? Like, you don't know what goes on with other people and their thoughts. So that makes sense. But again, he's saying, like, maybe there were threats over the years, maybe there were emails, a knock on the door. If that were the case, I still maintain, after taking Nancy, that person would have reached out directly to Savannah, because that person now has the one thing in the whole world that she wants back, right? Could they resist that if they're obsessed with her? I'm not an expert. He's an expert, but yeah, exactly, Kid Kitty. There's lots of weirdos. Yeah, but I mean, look, he's still making some interesting points. I wonder if they were like investigating any like previous threats, emails, anything weird. I suppose they do have to look through all of that if he's saying it's very common for anchors to receive that. You believe it is an inside job. Look, I mean, with the lack of information, I guess that's really possible. Like, it does seem like they must have had some kind of information to be able to manage what they've managed. I mean, look at how many days in we are to this case. Yeah, I don't know. He makes some good points. I'm kind of seeing his perspective there, but I still maintain that they would have reached out. But maybe I'll change my mind. And the porch guy is a distraction. Yeah, the porch guy just makes everything confusing, which if he were a distraction, I don't know if he is or isn't, but that would help, right? Like, it's a distraction and now everybody's just confused. Like, what is going on with this guy and his flowers? And yeah, I don't know. Hey, Stone. It's good to see you. All right, let's get back to this.
Yeah.
Can I add something to this, Megan?
Please.
This, what Fitz just said would answer two questions that we haven't had answers to before. Number one, why nothing was taken. There could have been something taken. There could have been something of Savannah's taken, which they wouldn't even have noticed. I'm sure she has her bedroom, her old bedroom is still there, and she probably wouldn't notice initially if some school trophy from 7th grade was missing or something along those lines, because they were looking for her mom. It also answers the question of what were they doing in there for 41 minutes. He was, he could have been upstairs trying to find trophies, ones that would really satiate his needs and desire.
Right. Well, and we don't know for sure if he was in there for 41 minutes, because we've never really totally understood how it was at 1:47 a.m. that the Ring cameras went offline, and then at 2:12 a.m. that an image was detected. We think, but we don't know, that the video of the man on the porch was the 2:12 time frame. So what happened between 1:47 and 2:12 with the man, we don't know if that's actually how this went down, but that would shorten the timeline that he was inside from 2:12 to 2:28. Still plenty of time to go rifling around in Savannah's childhood bedroom, and to mess with Nancy too. It's still a long time to get in there, and shouldn't have taken that long to get Nancy out, but one of the many mysteries in this case. We're talking about the sheriff. So he's changed his messaging again on whether there's a threat to the community in a way that I would argue seems to undermine that this is a stalker, that this is an NBC News stalker, or family member. Just to take you back through it, at the beginning of the investigation, the sheriff said this about whether there was a public safety threat. SOT 21.
With this being an active crime scene, is there any threat to the general public?
Trying to figure out my tone. Well, no, I don't think there's an active threat, but I hate to say that because, we're going to canvass that neighborhood and maybe there's a prowler been seen around. There's a lot of work still to do. We don't have any indication that that the public is in danger.
You're not sure if it's targeted. Why do you believe there's no wider threat to the public?
Well, we have crime in Tucson all the time, right? Like any city. And so when you say a threat to the public, is there somebody out there who's kidnapping elderly people in the middle of the night every night? We've not heard that. We don't believe that's the case.
No threat to the public. Now, here he is in an interview with NBC News just this past Friday, SOT 22.
Do you think that this suspect could strike again, whoever did this?
Well, absolutely. We believe we know why he did this, and we believe that it was targeted, but we're not 100% sure of that. And so it'd be silly to tell people, yeah, don't worry about it. You're not his target. Don't think for a minute that because it happened to the Guthrie family, you're safe. No, keep your wits about you.
What, Maureen?
Well, I think what he's trying to say is, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So if someone is predisposed to doing this type of crime, they may do it again. But the statistics, as he also said, don't support serial offender or people pulling 84-year-old ladies out of their bed. It just happens so rarely. I kind of just stopped listening to him a while ago because he should have hired his PIO. His PIO should have been the person delivering a clear and concise message. They should have been working with the FBI's PIO, and it should have just been delivered regularly in an organized fashion with no back and forth.
It's pretty.
Yeah, so I mean, that's something we've been saying from the beginning as well. Like when it comes to the sheriff, it's like he doesn't really see how he's being perceived. Sometimes he takes like a long way to say something, and at the end of it, you don't even really know what he meant. You're just like, what? And then Faye says, also, how come being in the dark inside the house, they didn't break anything? Yeah, well, I mean, we've heard immaculate, but only about some rooms, and we don't know which rooms. So that's a good point. Although they had that, as far as we know, that flashlight. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think the possibility of an inside job is still there.
Diametrically opposed. Say at the beginning there is no public safety threat, and then now, 44 days in, to say, don't think for a minute that you're safe. And then he also adds, Fitz, we believe we know why she was taken. It was targeted. So what is he trying to tell us here?
He doesn't know.
Well, he's covering his ass, to be CYA, to be blunt there at the end with those other statements. He wants to make sure if anything by chance does happen, again, something similar, even in some other part of the country that can somehow be linked to this, he doesn't want to be the one that they quote, at least his last quote, that, well, it could never happen anywhere. She was specifically targeted. This is not going to happen in Tucson or elsewhere. So I think he's obviously talked to other people and maybe said, all right, you may want to lighten that up a little bit there. You may have gone a little bit overboard in the beginning. I mean, obviously, it's been 44 days. And as far as we know, there have been no other abductions such as this one. But I think he just wanted to make sure he's kind of buttering his bread on both sides there. And he's covered.
I mean,
if something
saying
bad
though
does
explicitly,
happen.
we believe we know why she was targeted is new.
Well, that's a little... Yeah, I was going to say that's a little bit different. And that comes out and that, we've said all along when we were together, Megyn with Maureen and others, that, the investigators know a lot more than we do. And for him to say early on, at least, that they know why she was targeted, that means they have motivation listed. And if they think it was kidnapping earlier for profit, that seems to have been put, off the shelf there. So I would like to hear more about why the person was targeted or why Mrs. Guthrie was targeted. But they're keeping that close to the vest, obviously.
To your point, Maureen, you have to take everything the sheriff says with a grain of salt. But if that's true, that's huge. That's actually a huge development.
It is huge. And it tells us just what Fitz just said. And we all know those investigators know so much more than we do. And they're on to something.
That's kind of funny, though, because she's basically saying that would be huge if it didn't come from the sheriff, which is like bad. You should never hear that in a case, ever.
They're onto something big. They just may be having a hard time proving it. But if you look at the Corey Richins case, that took over, a year and several months before she got arrested, before they were able to really build a case. And building a case is like building a cage. You're doing it link by link by link. And, you have to have a certain sense of confidence. And for him to say, no one's really safe, he may just be saying, hey, we know what the motive is, but we don't know who you are, to give the offender a sense of security or something where he doesn't feel like he's in that cage yet because they want him to trip up. I've always had the feeling since the beginning that they're trying to get him to trip up, and they, as far as we know, haven't been able to, but we don't know everything they know. They could have another legitimate ransom note for all we know. And if it went straight to the FBI, we wouldn't know about it.
And we don't know whether his statements suggesting they didn't find anything from the DNA and the backpack investigation didn't go anywhere is true. We don't know whether any of those statements to us are true. He has no obligation to tell us the truth. And they often use the media for subterfuge around what the suspect may be hearing. So everything's got that huge grain of salt. Huge. It's the huge coarse sea salt grain of salt, not the tiny table salt that you get at the deli. I want to talk about the blood because this is something that's always bothered me. We have the blood spatter outside of the house, outside the front door. And we saw the video of those drops in the sort of the front patio area. And then we saw Fox News release more video. This is Brian Enton's video here showing the blood right outside of the front door. And then we saw more blood when Fox News released its own video showing that the blood continued down the walkway from this area here toward the driveway, the circular driveway. Now, in the video that we see of the perpetrator, we don't see a car sitting in the driveway, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there because we couldn't. It's a very large driveway. And here's the Fox News video showing more blood spatter. So clearly we all believed Nancy was taken out the front door in some way and taken down this gray concrete pathway, and we're assuming put into a car. But one of the things that's always bothered me, you guys, is that, as you know, when you're trying a case, you bring in an expert. You don't, you typically at any criminal trial, you will have the prosecution will call, or the defense sometimes will call, a witness in and put that person on the stand as an expert. And this is going to be extremely relevant in this case too. Law enforcement did confirm that this is Nancy's blood, but what else can we deduce about that, right? Like, what else can we tell from these droplets? We've all had lots of speculation about, well, they look like this. It's probably straight up and down blood drops. Well, let's check our speculation and bring in a true expert. Her name is Dr. Amy Santoro, and she's worked as a forensic scientist for 18 years. She's especially adept at analyzing blood at crime scenes. She's investigated over 1,000 cases, including more than 500 crime scenes, and holds a certification in bloodstain pattern analysis. Dr. Santoro, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for doing this. So you're the expert. Tell us what you see when you see those blood droplets outside of Nancy's front door.
Well, thanks for having me. The blood outside, I think, is really concerning because, to me, assuming that Miss Guthrie is moving at, somewhat of a walking pace, these blood stains show that she's bleeding pretty quickly. What type of injury is it? I don't think we can tell from the stains. They look like drip stains to me, and those small dots of blood are what we would call satellite spatter. That happens when blood falls from a certain height onto a target surface like this. So what I can tell is that the blood is falling from a height probably more than 2 feet, whether that's from her hand, her arm, her face. I don't think we can tell, but I think it's an indication that she is bleeding very quickly. There's so much blood out there that if you were walking, I don't think you would see that distribution of blood with a slower bleed. You can see there are multiple drip stains in that area. So unless she's standing there stationary for a period of time, which of course is possible, although I think unlikely in an abduction, I think it shows that she really is bleeding pretty badly.
Does that suggest?
I don't know. I don't necessarily know if that. Look, she's an expert. I'm not, but I think that she would probably need to know a little bit more about like the speed and the height and all of that to be able to say that she's bleeding pretty quickly. I mean, yeah. I remember this vaguely. This is the expert that CJ was talking about last time when he was saying that why is she saying that it seems like the blood could have come from Nancy's arm or something. So I'm remembering this now. Remembering a little bit, but yeah, I mean, we'll still go through it. A lot of people have spoken afterwards about, and other experts about it being a nosebleed, and maybe she just doesn't want to say so. Maybe she's just one of those nervous people, for legal reasons.
To you that she had any particular kind of wound?
I don't think we can say, and I think it's important to be conservative. I don't want to go out on a limb, and certainly I don't want to speculate on, the severity of the injury, other than to say I think it's fair to assume that there's some sort of quickly bleeding source. That could be, just a tear to the skin on her arm. She's an elderly woman. You can see even in some of her older media appearances that she has kind of a typical thin-skinned appearance that people tend to get when they're older. So if there's some sort of struggle and her skin rips, that could cause it. If she receives some sort of blunt force trauma to the face, she gets hit in the face, that could cause it. We often see blood dripping like this from a bleeding nose, but it really could be anything.
Can you rule anything out? Because it is a little odd that there's so many perfect droplets.
I don't know that we can rule anything out, but I do have some suspicion that perhaps she received this injury outside. And the reason I say that is because when I look at the video, I really don't see any blood in the area of the door. There's not any blood staining on the threshold. There's not any blood staining, or doesn't appear to be any blood staining on the door itself.
So she's saying that she thinks that the injury was received outside. That's something that I definitely agree with, just in my limited knowledge, but that's because I feel like that spray pattern that you can see right now is the impact being whether she spit it, like CJ said, or whatever other weird scenario she's coming up with here, but that is the origin of it. And then the rest is dripping off that, I don't know, event, the being pistol whipped or the nosebleed or something like that, or the spitting. So I agree with her in that sense that, yeah, okay, it started outside whatever this is. Or there was some kind of an impact outside. So whether she was hit or whether this is where she spit it out, that didn't happen before this spray here. And then the rest is dripping off it. I agree with that. Not an expert, but I agree with that at least.
Which makes me wonder if she's already outside past that threshold when she receives this injury. And if it's outside, I know it's a fairly secluded area, but nobody heard anything. So that's probably something more like a strike or, just a simple skin tear and not some sort of injury that's going to cause a very loud noise.
Why do you think that the blood droplets all appear to be intact? I'm just picturing like Nancy possibly walking, possibly with a bloody nose. And it seems to me, especially with an elderly woman, that blood would fall and then you'd likely step in it and possibly even drag your foot. A lot of elderly people shuffle for stability's sake.
Well, I do think that there are some stains that look a little bit strange. They're irregular in shape, which could be transfer stains from something like, the blood on the bottom of her feet. But you're only going to step in that blood if you're standing in that area. And if you're getting pulled or dragged away and you're moving pretty quickly, or you're being carried away, you're not going to be leaving those types of stains. You're not going to be stepping in that blood if you're moving away very quickly. There's just not an opportunity to do that.
So you can't tell whether she walked of her own volition or was carried?
I don't think I can. No, I mean, you can see that there are some unusual looking stains there, but I don't think it's enough to determine if it's from a foot, from a shoe. Also, I think it's important to understand that this is after the crime scene has been released, and we know that there was at least some sampling taken of these bloodstains from crime scene responders, so they could have caused some alteration to the way these stains look by taking their swabs. You can see that parts of those bloodstains are missing. The center of some of those bloodstains are starting to flake away. Some of that could have been removed by crime scene responders as they're taking samples.
This is this may go back to the question you already answered about what you can't rule anything out necessarily, but not having been to any murder crime scenes, can you say that this was not, for example, a gunshot or like a stabbing wound, because those would have produced a lot more blood? I've heard some say this to me looks like a nosebleed where you get a fair amount of blood, but it falls pretty straightforward, straight down, as opposed to, forgive the term, but like a real gusher of a wound.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the type of blood staining that you would get from a very serious injury, like a gunshot. We typically expect to see much smaller stains associated with a gunshot. And then once you are bleeding from a serious injury, we do tend to see a lot more blood. There are so many variables that can affect this. People oftentimes just bleed internally, and certainly I've worked.
Yeah, so that like a serious injury can bleed internally, so I don't think you can know necessarily. Like, I don't know. Maybe we'll skip a little bit of this. Let's see how it goes.
Shooting homicides where there's almost no blood on scene, but it doesn't look to me like it's associated with something like a gunshot. There's patterns that I would expect to see in a gunshot case that I don't see here, but we don't know what the inside of the house looks like.
Maureen and Fitz, do you guys have any questions you want to ask Amy?
I do. Two things, Amy. First, you think that these bloodstains are consistent with someone moving quickly across the porch?
Well, I think the blood source is bleeding quickly because you can see all of these drips, right? So if you're standing on this porch for a minute, you can be bleeding slowly, drip, drip, drip. But that's probably not the situation. You probably aren't hanging out having a conversation out here at 2:30 in the morning in the middle of an abduction. If you're trying to take Mrs. Guthrie away from the house, you're trying to get out of there. So if she is being pulled or she is walking, then what we see is that much faster drip, 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 a much more serious injury, because there are quite a lot of stains there. Even down the sidewalk, you can see those stains are pretty close to each other. So however she is bleeding, it's replenishing quite quickly. But again, she's a lady of a certain age.
Right.
And they do tend to bleed, that happens.
And secondly, certainly the investigators have a much better idea as to where the blood came from, because if it came from her nose, there would be all kinds of residue in there. If it came from her mouth, there'd be all kinds of saliva, right? So they would be able to rule some things out, and they probably have a much better understanding of where, in fact, this blood came from.
Yeah,
right?
I would hope that there was some serological testing that was done. We know that there was DNA analysis, and we know that this is Nancy Guthrie's blood, but we can do serological testing to determine if there is saliva present in these stains. I don't see any indication that there would be, but we can certainly test for that in a laboratory setting.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. Maybe you could figure out what part of the body it may have come from. Go ahead, Fitz.
Amy, I've been asked this question a few times over the last month. The bleeding seems, or I should say the blood stains seems to have stopped at a certain
not to say
point.
It like that, but yeah.
and the best I could speculate is either direct pressure was put on whatever the wound was by perhaps Nancy herself or the abductor, or perhaps in whatever condition she was, the abductor picked her up. I know she's about 140 pounds. I guess, a fit guy could carry someone, and perhaps the blood just, kind of dripped down on whatever she was wearing at that time.
Well, she's got mobility
You're the
issues,
expert here. Do you have any potential hypothesis as to why the blood drops stopped at a certain point?
Well, the first thing that I think when we have something like this, a trail of drip stains, and then they stop, is that person got into a car. That's the most obvious answer that kind of occurs to me. But you're right, if there's some sort of pressure applied, even by Nancy Guthrie herself, that's going to lessen the amount of blood, which I think would suggest that she's able to at least tend to her wounds, maybe, just able to put her hand over wherever is bleeding, or maybe able to move her clothing around to cover so that the blood is being absorbed into her clothing and not dripping onto the concrete anymore. But I think we really just don't know. Those are answers that we just don't have right now. I'd like to know what the rest of the driveway looked like at the beginning of crime scene processing. It's interesting to me that there was this much blood.
That's a good point. And she's saying, she's saying that, you can't really know how it looked at the beginning of crime scene processing. And that's leading into the next thing that we keep saying, is that this scene was open and closed and open and closed and open and closed. So crime scene processing is probably the least of the issues at this point. There's been so much contamination, and there's been processing, and there's been closing and opening. And how do we know about the integrity of this evidence? We can't be sure. We can't be sure exactly. Even the people investigating the scene can't say that they're properly sure. So, it's kind of like they're doing the best they can with what they have, but they have to acknowledge that there's quite a bit of compromise in this scene. You're welcome, CJ. Thank you for visiting as well. All right.
Blood that was left outside after the crime scene was released. That's probably not a choice that I would have made if I was managing this crime scene. But since we do know that crime scene responders were there before these images were taken, it's possible that there's more blood that was already collected and we just don't see it.
Ever been in a bad relationship? Fuel your body. Beef is a complete protein. It contains incredible, healthy flavor from somebody who actually does this for a living. As you know, there are these real...
No, I'm good with the blood. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Doc. It's such a pleasure. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's interesting, right? It's like all along I've been wanting to hear from somebody who actually does this for a living. As you know, there are these real experts. I'm kind of relieved. I know maybe it's simple at this point to say such a thing, but I'm relieved that it didn't look like gunshot blood. I know we don't have a whole lot of reason to believe that Nancy's alive still, but I'm still relieved that maybe even to the expert, it looked more like a possible nosebleed, guys.
I'm still so sad after watching the intro video you guys put together of everything that happened, and there's this poor woman. We've all been hoping and praying for her since the very beginning, and this is just too much. And my blood simultaneously is boiling with whoever did this to her.
Yeah, who's watching shows like this, as you've been pointing out, Fitz, enjoying it. To your point about the person who may have taken her because they're obsessed with Savannah, and just getting off on knowing now Savannah's thinking about him. You know, like all this time, Savannah's had to think about him and speculate about him. And now that there's an image from the front door, you know, possibly think about the actual him. It's infuriating. And speaking of the photos, can I just ask you your thoughts on that? But also this report now that they did recover some additional still images from the cameras around Nancy's house, but no moving pictures, no video. And they say ABC News is reporting, like, I don't know if I should say nothing of interest. That's not fair, but nothing incriminating, you know, random pictures that don't really tell us much. I guess it's just, to me, it seems like just yet another big disappointment, Jim. I don't know. What do you make of it? The reports of they did get some photos, but not video. And they are still checking, you know, at least they're still checking the cameras around her house.
And just to go back to the first part of what you said to me, if this person who abducted Mrs. Guthrie had a trophy room before about Savannah with her pictures and little incense and candles, I assure you it is much more incorporated now in terms of a whole second wing of that trophy room or trophy section of the house in terms of artifacts keeping to remind him of his very keen interest in Savannah. And again, I'm not locking into that, but that's something that these investigators have to look into. And as far as
let me just add one other detail before you get to the camera analysis. The ABC is reporting that the cameras recorded nothing suspicious. That's how they put it, nothing suspicious. But they were able to observe several people in the back and side yards over an unspecified period prior to the abduction. And they said that also they have images of after Nancy was taken, law enforcement officers seeing near the pool. However, the cameras captured nothing on the night of the abduction, said sources. Investigators have drawn no conclusions as to why, but one source described it as odd. No images on the night of the abduction. I mean, why? This is like the same thing as like the neighbors saying their cameras went off on, you know, the night of the abduction for the period they believe around the time she was taken. But we've had other smart analysts say they don't believe that the guy had a Wi-Fi jammer because there's no way we'd be seeing those images of the guy pulling the vegetation out and
Right. And also, like, I don't want to, like, no offense to the neighbor, but he's checked the one night that's suspicious. Has he checked, like, maybe this happens to his cameras and he doesn't know? Like, obviously he's looked that night, but maybe that's something that actually happens. How would he know? It's not like he's, you know, checking his cameras in the small hours of the morning on normal nights. Maybe he's checked now, but I don't know.
Putting him on the doorbell if he had a Wi-Fi jammer on him. You know, I don't know what to believe, but it is strange that they see lots of thumbnail images prior to her abduction, the police after the abduction, but nothing the night of.
You know, in my early days as an investigator, some places would have surveillance cameras, security cameras, and the bank cameras always work. And I'm sure Maureen can attest to that. You move the old film, take it, get it in process. There you have pictures of the bank robbery in progress. But invariably, the other ones, private security, whatever, if you're lucky, if you get half the time that they actually work. Then we went to a whole point in time where all these cameras worked all the time, and they solved so many cases, not just cases Maureen and I worked, but, you know, other cases we read about in the media. Now we have this case of Nancy Guthrie. They have enough wherewithal to install a camera system in there, and, you know, even around the pool, whatever. And we have these failures to perform, if you will, or failures to provide an accurate recount of what happened that night. And yeah, I mean, the jammer part was always, I listened to, I think we discussed it last week, and I listened to that part, and sure, it's a possibility, a little bit extra sophistication that I would have given this guy, and really nothing else makes sense so far. But does the person somehow know the system to begin with, and it didn't require a sophisticated jammer type mechanism, but just knew the weaknesses and the flaws it contained therein? Or did they do something days or weeks before to somehow counteract that system? I don't know. He could have just been lucky, and these particular images don't work. And
right? Like a jammer, okay, fine, but all you really need is just flowers, right? You just need to go and get some flowers, and everyone knows that.
The last thing I'll leave you with here is I appreciate all the sources that media people have. I was never a source. I never asked Maureen this question. I'm positive she was never a source for a media outlet. You just have to be careful sometimes of what ABC and other outlets are reporting. And we know for a fact, I will say this emphatically, that the investigators have a lot more information, including surveillance images, than we know about. Of course, they're not perfect, not all the ones that they might want to see of the guy in progress, but at the same time, they have more than we know. And still shots, could do moving video people, could be animals, could be human. These are all things that the investigators know, and hopefully they're pouring it down into a funnel, and they have a little stream of evidence that they will eventually know will take them to the actual abductor.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, Maureen, the neighbors are saying that their cameras stopped working on the night in question right around the time that Nancy was taken. But again, other experts are saying if you had a Wi-Fi jammer sophisticated enough to jam the Wi-Fi at the neighbors' properties, there is zero chance we would have those images of the guy coming onto the patio and messing with the Ring doorbell. Like if he had the Wi-Fi jammer and it shut things down at 1:47, right? Because they're saying the doorbells went offline at 1:47. Cameras went offline, but then an image was captured at 2:12. Like, what happened with the Wi-Fi jammer? It worked at 1:47, and then we forgot to use it when we actually approached the house.
Well, it depends on the user. So much of this could be chalked up to user error. But I agree with Fitz. I think a jammer just seems a little bit too sophisticated for that clown we saw on the front porch. I think it's far more likely it was a walkie-talkie, because clearly they didn't have their phones with them, or their phones certainly weren't on, because we weren't able to find them. The cast team wasn't able to find them, and they're the best in the world at this stuff. So my guess is it's a walkie-talkie. They're easy to get. They're cheap. You can buy them at a swap meet. You can buy them anywhere. And it's just like, yeah, we've got her at the front door. Pull up to the front of the house. The camera's been disabled.
So that's
Boom,
it. So
up
it's
she
a
comes.
walkie-talkie, Maureen. He's got an accomplice.
Yeah, I believe he has an accomplice. I've said that from the very beginning. I think there are two people involved. I don't think there were 5 people involved, but I think 2 people were involved. And who knows? Maybe the guy that was at the door is dead already, because it's pretty hard to keep a secret when you have 2 people involved and there's $1 million on the table, $1.2 million on the table. It's hard.
Well, it would make perfect sense if that's a walkie-talkie, he's got somebody helping him. But what doesn't make sense is that person around at the back door getting in that way. Again, our report was that there was signs of force. Ashley reported that there were signs of forced entry and that the back door was found wide open. But why wouldn't the Nancy Ring cameras or other cameras on her property show any images of someone in the backyard or the side yard on the night in question? Maybe
because they could have been broken weeks before, like Fitz says. I see it all the time. My company, we do those video camera. We install systems, we design systems, all that kind of stuff. You cannot believe how people have things hobbled together at their home, and then they just stop working, or a tree branch fell and that whole side of the house isn't working. It's oftentimes just a matter of that, or the system becomes inoperable because you added something else and accidentally disconnected these 2 cameras on the west side, or something along those lines.
I just want to show the picture that we do have of whatever that device is, whether it's a Wi-Fi jammer or a walkie-talkie or something else. It's on the side. In the front, you see the gun, that black and white thing, and this is the gun in the front. But if you look on the side, we put a little circle around it. That's it. I don't know what that is. Why do we think it's a walkie-talkie, Maureen?
I think it's a walkie-talkie because that's the same type of antenna that you can get on a lot of these inexpensive walkie-talkies. The antenna will never, you have to have giant pockets for you to be able to put the whole thing in there like that. It's certainly not a phone, like a lot of people were saying, because the last thing you want is for your iPhone to be flopping out of your pockets and left at crime scene. That's a great way to get caught. But you can see it's one of those, now some of the jammers have a very similar antenna, but the jammers, in my opinion, have a couple of antennas, and they're not that strong. They usually wouldn't be able to go all the way to the neighbors unless it was a really high quality one. Not so much military grade, but it would have to be a pretty high quality one, or you'd have to have another person standing over at the neighbors with their inexpensive jammer, which is just getting too complicated.
It's getting too complicated. Go ahead, Fitz.
2 things related to that last picture you showed to us. It can't be ruled out that that device is not necessarily a walkie-talkie, but a police scanner. And this person may have an interest in listening to the police what they're doing. Doesn't mean he's doing it in real time as he's doing this, but may have some kind of a headphone connection. And he can, when he gets back in the car, he can certainly follow if there's been a 911 call of any sort. Suspicious. I can't rule out, and of course it is a walkie-talkie. There's at least another person involved, and that, you know, none of us ruled that out early on. There's cases of serial killers. One well-known case in Canada from like 30 years ago was a husband and wife, or at least a man and woman partner, and she would help him entice these young women into his van, and he would do his thing after that. And the other part is, just look at that picture. I happened to watch one of my favorite movies over the weekend, Tombstone, and you look at the very end, the Doc Holliday confrontation with Johnny Ringo. That's how Doc Holliday held his gun, or the holster part of it was in front of his waist, not exactly in front of the groin like this guy here, but very close. And I already mentioned that, is this guy a fan of the Zodiac Killer with the mask he choose to wear? I know your folks even found it in real time. They put that picture up of the Zodiac person. Now we have someone wearing a holster like Doc Holliday did in the movie portrayed by Val Kilmer.
Well,
you know,
and that movie
maybe
got a lot of play over the past year since Val Kilmer died. Even we watched it, and I'm not big on Westerns.
Yes.
But, you know, that could have been in the consciousness of somebody for good reason.
Point.
All right, I want to keep going because there's a couple of other facts around the initial days that she was missing that we should get to in this episode. And that includes the fact that the crime scene was turned over to the family within 2 days of Nancy's disappearance. I mean, less than. She went missing. As of Sunday morning, they discovered it. And by Monday evening, he had surrendered the crime scene back to the family. I mean, it was very strange and it was very quick. And he said, the scene is done. We're done with the residents. If we need to go back, we will, but we've turned it over to the family. And then on February 5th, fresh crime scene tape wrapped around the length of the house and was then promptly taken back down. Then on February 8th, the sheriff's office said it's going to keep a security presence at the home for security concerns. On February 25th, that was the day that they went back and they spent considerable time near the front door, appearing to focus on the porch and the walkway where the trail of blood was discovered. We believe that was the day the FBI went and took pictures. But why, Fitz, would he turn the crime scene back over to the family so early in this? And then a related, I think, question is, why didn't this sheriff accept help from anyone in the searching? I have never covered a missing person case where they don't have the citizen grid search. You know, they're all but holding hands, covering the acreage around where the person was last seen to make sure they didn't lose a phone, they didn't lose a sneaker, there isn't a strand of hair. He time and time again, he turned down those offers from reputable search groups with very successful track records, just saying it's going to interfere with law enforcement. So he turned the house back over immediately to the family, and he rejected outside help. Thoughts on those?
I think the second part of your question answers the first part. Clearly, the house was turned over too soon. And they could have had a full-time team in there of 25 evidence response team members, going through it. But even 48 hours, I think, would be too much, or too soon, I should say, to let it go. And the fact that he wasn't looking for assistance or at least additional help outside, at least not publicly, of which we are aware, that could explain why some of these hasty decisions were made in this regard. Any crime scene is a treasure trove of evidence, but you have to know how to look for it and find it. And of course, some scenes have more evidence than others, depending the sophistication level of the offender or offenders. But the scene was turned over too early. And I think, I'm not going to overtly criticize the sheriff here, but elected officials around for a long time. Just in the last week, some things came out from his past when I think he was with El Paso PD, some questions about some things back then. I believe you can get an ego and you surround yourself with yes men and women, and this is how I'm going to run it. This is what I'm doing. And then all of a sudden it comes back to kick them in the rear end. And they realized then he had to retighten it again. But once you let a crime scene go to pizza delivery men, media people, otherwise, you're going to potentially lose some evidence there. There's never any mistake.
Is there an issue with my audio, or is it the media as well? Just let me know. Can everyone hear me, and can you hear the video that I'm playing? And then also, I just wanted to let you guys know, sometimes in chat when you see a comment from EvilleCJ, it is actually CJ, but sometimes it's also me. It seems to be putting that handle down when I post as well, because I'm doing it through StreamYard. So I should probably do it through the actual YouTube chat. But the Twitter link that I posted in there is me. even though it doesn't say so. Sorry, guys. It's been fine. Okay. Thank you, Kitty. Yeah, maybe try hopping out and in. You know how YouTube can be sometimes.
To be made to hold a crime scene longer. So yeah, I think there's maybe some hubris on the part early on of the sheriff, and I'm not going to overly criticize him. I haven't really called him names or like some other people have, but I think bringing help in earlier on, and they would have then suggested, don't release the house yet. Give us time to go over it and give it a good week or two, and maybe at that point safely release it with all the evidence collected.
Thoughts on that, Maureen, on either one of those points?
Yeah. Having been on the evidence response team for decades, I can tell you that we would have secured the entire scene. We would have expanded the crime scene. We would have had the crime scene tape all the way around that house so that we could really thoroughly take our time and go through it with the primary scene, the secondary.
Okay, so I couldn't have said that better myself. Like, I'm actually going to play it again, but you know, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. And they haven't even done the searches that would involve them finding a secondary scene at this point. So their primary scene is, they don't even have a boundary on their primary scene, I don't think, because as she's saying, there should have been tape around the entire house. And that should have been maintained and stayed in place until they were really done processing the scene. Like, it's better to take too much than too little from the scene, right? You don't know what you're going to need because you don't know what you're dealing with. So, like I said, I'm going to play that little bit again because I think it's amazing.
Having been on the evidence response team for decades, I can tell you that we would have secured the entire scene. We would have expanded the crime scene. We would have had the crime scene tape all the way around that house so that we could really thoroughly take our time and go through it with the primary scene, the secondary scene, which would be the exterior, the entryway, the porch, the yard. We would have taken that mat because he was standing on the mat, moving around on the mat. What was on the bottom of his shoes? Fibers from the interior of his vehicle, dirt from the yard where he keeps his boots or on his back porch, dog hair from his family pet.
Also, okay, fibers from where he was in the house so that you can retrace everything he did in the house, that he moved around. You know, you don't know. Maybe he went to a different room that you didn't think he went directly to, but then you would still be able to see from the mat. Obviously, it could be somebody else, but if it's mixed in with something, I'd imagine that they can tell a lot. They can't tell exactly that it's him that walked there, but it could still help them. You know, they can still rule stuff out. Maybe it's a little bit far-fetched to be able to retrace his steps through the house exactly from the mat. But what I'm saying is those are the kind of things that they should collect and consider and then rule out if it doesn't work that way, you know?
There are just so many things that can be on the treads of your shoes that mat would have just been very important to me. It would have also been important because there could have been blood droppings on that mat as well. Also with that bite light in his mouth had to be watering. I'm sure he got it on his gloves. You can see when you see that close-up photo of his face with the face mask on that it's slightly askewed, almost like he was wiping his nose or his mouth because that bite light was causing him to salivate. That could have been, there could be saliva on that mat. I also would have really done a number on that door. You know, a lot of police officers say they would have taken that front door. If you take the door, you can just slow everything down and you can have just like when you're in the lab and you have a big piece of evidence, you can stand around with a bunch of 10-pound brains and you could say, all right, we could do this, or should we start with that? Or what's our number one goal? Back in the day, it was, do we want DNA or do we want fingerprints? Well, now you can get both, but you have to be very, very careful in your approach and the way you develop that DNA and take possession of that evidence for testing. So there were just a whole lot of things. The shoe or the vehicle impressions was the driveway. They may have been destroyed when the police vehicles pulled up in the driveway when they thought it was a walkaway, which is understandable. But there, it was just too soon, I think. And the Bureau would have just sent in, as Fitz was saying, and I said earlier, just teams of people, one team for the primary, one for the secondary, one for the tertiary, and a team to do the whole grid search, like we talked about.
I don't get it. Like I haven't solved a case as a member of law enforcement, but I've covered so many missing persons cases, and you just always see it. And we're used to see it. It gives the family something to do, to be out there hand in hand with volunteers to look for any little clue. And there's so much area to cover. This is like a wide array of desert right around where Nancy lives. Just doesn't make any sense to me. I wanted to follow up on, this is the aerial view of Nancy's house. You can just see it's just huge. There's so many places to go. And since we don't have any clear evidence of the car driving away, the foot search seems pretty relevant. I want to go back to possible suspects. So we talked about how the sheriff said, you're not safe. I mean, like, for lack of a better term, he's now saying to the community, don't relax. Yeah, you're safe. Don't anybody you're not safe. You don't put your guard down. Like, oh, great, Sheriff. Thanks a lot. So that would suggest, if he's sincere, that he's leaning more toward not a stalker and not a family member, like an actual burglar, abductor, intruder type. And there was a little bit more of that interview with the NBC News reporter, the local reporter, Liz Kreutz. Along those lines, I want to show you the second shot we had cut here. Watch.
There is something that's come out in the investigation that gives you a sense of motive here and why this person did this?
I think it's come out from day one. I think from day one, we had some strong beliefs about what happened, and those beliefs haven't diminished.
Do you believe it was a burglary gone wrong?
That was a yes or no question. I don't understand.
Reporter Liz Kreutz. Along those lines, I want to show you the second shot we had cut here. Watch.
There is something that's come out in the investigation that gives you a sense of motive here and why this person did this?
I think it's come out from day one. I think from day one, we had some strong beliefs about what happened, and those beliefs haven't diminished.
Do you believe it was a burglary gone wrong?
I'm not going to get into those theories. We have our beliefs. Everybody else has theirs.
Nano.
We have our beliefs and everybody else has theirs. But you are the police. So your beliefs should be a little more based in evidence. Okay.
Says he's intentionally withholding their theory and other details in the case, citing the integrity of the investigation.
So he's saying something without saying something there, right, Maureen? Like, from day one, we had strong beliefs about what happened, and those beliefs haven't diminished.
Right. It sounds to me like it's the Corey Richins case all over again, or a number of other, just a myriad of other big cases where it takes a while to build this cage around this individual. And you can think someone's guilty all you want. A lot of people do think some people are guilty in this case, and other people suspect other people, but you have to be able to prove it in a court of law. You have to have it locked down with all kinds of evidence, and you have to really take a close look at the exculpatory evidence and make sure that that is what it looks like and disprove it.
Can I ask you about that? The Corey Richins thing, just for the listening audience, in case they don't remember that case. We talked about it on Kelly's Court last week, but she's the woman who is accused, she's on trial right now, of killing her husband with fentanyl in his Moscow Mule cocktail. She, a year later, published a children's book on grief, how to deal with grief of loss of a parent. Meanwhile, she's alleged to have killed her husband, and she got arrested 3 days after the publication of her book and is now on trial for his murder. She says it was a suicide and that he was depressed. But all the while, they let her be free, and that whole year, clearly they were building a case against her. So when you say it's like the Corey Richins case, are you suggesting maybe the sheriff has, let's say, a family member or someone known to Nancy who they're building the cage around right now?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think there's someone they think may have done something. Maybe it's a handyman, maybe it's a delivery man. I don't know who it is, but whoever they're thinking, I think they're building the cage right now. That's what I call it.
Well, that would explain his more confident statements, suggesting we think we know the motive, number one. And then in the follow-up saying, from day one, we had strong beliefs about what happened, and those beliefs have not diminished. So he's definitely got a theory of the crime, and he says it's only gotten stronger. It sounds like he's not since learned that he was wrong about his initial instincts, which again, I think we all believe were probably that she was murdered, just for one thing, because he he did call it a crime scene. He called in homicide, and he called off the search for her within 24 hours. That's some, even though he gave a lot of like, we have to believe she's still out there comments, his behavior was more telling in my view. So that leads me to who?
Well, some of
right?
that saying we still have hope. We hope she's out there. We really want to bring her home alive, please. Some of that is to try to get the offender to slip up and try to go for, the money, but that hasn't worked. Whoever this offender or these offenders are, they've just felt that going for the money is too dangerous. They can't do it. They cannot, they just can't do it without getting caught. That's their belief. That's what
if that was ever their goal, at least I would add here.
Yes.
Right. Now, that leads me to one of the people who we've discussed as, somebody they may be looking at, and the whole question of the brother-in-law. Again, do not mean to suggest that the brother-in-law committed this crime, but he's one of the family members and he was the last one to see her, so he's fair game to discuss. I told the audience last week, my own information is that Savannah Guthrie is very angry people are discussing the brother-in-law or anyone in her family. She clearly believes her family are all innocent victims and had nothing to do with her mother's abduction. For what it's worth, on the one hand, you would expect her to defend her family. On the other hand, she does know them and we don't. So it does count for something.
Yes.
Having said that, the sheriff's messaging around the brother-in-law has been yet another thing that's been very confused and ever changing and did the family no favors. Let's face it. He started off to the New York Times on February 4th. As a reminder, Nancy was taken overnight, January 31st into February 1st. By February 4th, he was telling the New York Times, Miss Guthrie was taken sometime between 9:45 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday morning. She had dinner with her daughter, Annie, and her son-in-law, Tommaso.
Right, that's true, Faye. So like day one, they believed that she wandered off. So he's saying his beliefs haven't diminished since then. So then what? Like that can't even be true. Like day one, we know that like the family was trying, well, we can kind of figure from what Savannah has said that the family was trying to persuade him to take this more seriously than as if she'd wandered off, right? And so now he's saying his beliefs haven't diminished from day one. Yeah, I don't know.
And the son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, dropped her off and ensured she made it inside safely before leaving, the sheriff added. So,
okay, so in the intro to this video of Megyn Kelly, they were saying that I think that they showed a clip of them saying that they believed that she was home, or they assumed she was home because the gate opened, and they gave reasoning like that. But here, to an article, I think he's quoted saying it was confirmed that she made it home safely by family.
He specifically told the New York Times that it was Tommaso who dropped Nancy off at home. In other words, the last person to see her other than the abductor. Then the next day, on February 5th, he said the following about who dropped her off.
There's also conflicting reports about who was the last person to actually see Nancy and drive her home. We know she took an Uber to Annie's house, but can you confirm whether it was Annie or her son-in-law Tommaso who took her home?
I think the timeline that the sheriff provided was a family member, but just family.
We're going to go with family.
We're going to go with. She's so ridiculous. Like, you just told us that it was Tommaso. That was
Well, it was also a prompt, though, Megyn, from the FBI, prompted him to say family member. We're going to go with family member,
Right. Like you should have done that the first time, and you didn't. And the messaging in general around the family has been all over the board. I mean, he wants us to not suspect the family, but he doesn't actually have any real reason to tell us not to suspect them. We just came up with this. So Tuesday, February 3rd was when Ashley Banfield reported that a law enforcement source told her the brother-in-law may be the prime suspect. Then the car of Annie and Tommaso got towed and impounded and is in evidence. As of that same day, Tuesday, February 3rd. February 5th, Sheriff Nanos. We've not identified a suspect or a person of interest. Nobody's been eliminated. Everyone's still a suspect. February 7th. They were inside Annie Guthrie's Arizona home for hours. The law enforcement officers were taking photographs of multiple rooms until about 10:30 p.m. local time. February 16th, Sheriff Nanos to the local Tucson affiliate. Not one single person in the family is a suspect. They've been ruled out as suspects since the first few days of the investigation. I am saying they are clear. We have cleared them. He said, to be clear, to the Guthrie family, to include all siblings and spouses, has been cleared as possible suspects in the case. The next day, February 17th, at this point, the Guthrie family, including siblings and spouses, has not been identified as suspects. They have not. So he's walking back. They're cleared to, well, they haven't been identified as suspects. So, I mean, he's just, I mean, I can't, like, it's annoying me yet again, Fitz, because he caused this. I'm sorry, but he helped cause this.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can safely say he is consistent in his inconsistencies, and certainly when it comes to the family itself.
Inconsistent.
And I hate, these, ruling out of family members or other people early on, and I can only envision a prosecutor someday getting this case if it so happens it is somebody who was cleared in the case. I'll just keep it generic here, and they have to know, and they have to bring charges against that person and put them before a jury. When a sheriff or some other DA or whomever said, no, they've been cleared all along. You never clear anybody. And there's other cases I've worked, I've been directly involved in. I've even been sued over in which family members were automatically ruled out by the DA. So no one can be here. I still say one of the strongest family members, I hope they've interviewed and re-interviewed this person, was the child of Annie and Tommaso. And I think there's only one, maybe there's another one, I'm not sure. But I think that person separately interviewed.
Figured out that he's about 20. Deb will double check me on that. I think, yes, keep going.
And I've heard 20 and I've heard 11.
So. Oh, no. Sorry. No, she said it's his son who's 8. His son who's 8.
Okay, now 8. Okay.
I believe
we're
that
going to double
person
check.
could be a wealth of information, regardless of the age. And I believe they were in the house that night when Nancy came over for dinner to Annie and Tommaso's house. And again, I'm not, careful not to cast aspersions, but that person is sort of almost a neutral arbiter, wouldn't have enough sense at a relatively early age to know how to cover things up if in fact there is any sort of a cover up. And and there's experts out there, and I've known a few of them over the years with the FBI. Their full-time expertise is in fact interviewing young children, 3, 4, 5, even younger sometimes. But certainly an 8-year-old has their will and their wits about them. So so no one can be ruled out. Why the sheriff insisted on doing that? It may have been pressure from the Guthrie family to do so. Hey, all these,
for sure there was
accusations and intimations, whatever. Sheriff, you got to get out there and say something. Well, I really can't. And back and forth, and something was negotiated, and he went out and said that. Then kind of came back a little bit the next day. I can't figure that out either. I don't know. Is he Clouseau or is he Columbo? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Does it tell us anything, Maureen, that he's telling the NBC affiliate, I've had my theory from day one, and I haven't moved off of it. I've only had more reason to believe my theory.
Yeah.
And since day one, day 17, he was saying they're cleared. They've all been cleared. I mean, he did reverse it. He dialed it back a little by saying, well, none of them has been identified as a suspect. But does it tell us potentially that he?
So I think, honestly, and I'm picking it up from these people as well, is that I think he says stuff and then he gets reprimanded and then they send him out to try and fix what he said, and then he makes it worse and says something new that he shouldn't have said. Like, I honestly think that's what it is. Like, I think going back to the very beginning of this episode when Maureen was saying he should have just gotten his PIO, dealt with everything that way in the way that you're supposed to, like, that would have saved the public, the family, the department so much chaos. Because I don't know, maybe it's like the way he relates when he speaks to the public. It's not helping.
Doesn't believe the family had anything to do with it when he's saying, today, I've had the same theory since the beginning. My theory's only gotten stronger. And in that time, he did come out to say all of the family have been cleared.
Yes, I mean, if you believe he's not going to change his mind again, this is why I'm a logic-driven thinker. And when things go wonky and back and forth like this, I have a very difficult time with it. He's a law enforcement official. His PIO should be handling this. It should be a clear and concise message every single time. And that's never what we've received. And the other thing you should be doing with your PIO or your messaging in general is to assuage any of the fears that your constituents or the citizens of your AOR have. And that's not happening either. So I just don't know what to think with this person. But I agree. It sounds like whatever his opinion was at the beginning, it's just gotten stronger. But
okay, so Yeah, I mean, everything that we've been saying, I mean, we've already pointed out that his opinion at the beginning was that, well, it seems his opinion at the beginning was that there wasn't even really a crime to investigate. And she's talking about, I think she used the word wonky. That's interesting because this back and forth thing of suspect, not suspect, dangerous, not dangerous, that like coincides so well with the crime scene, right? We're done, it's open, okay, it's closed again, okay, we're not, you know, like it's kind of similar. There's definitely a pattern to it.
That's in complete contrast to other things that we've heard.
Yes, like
So your
well,
guess
like
is
him
as good as
saying at the
mine.
beginning, there's no threat. Don't worry. We believe this was targeted. That's what he said in the beginning. And now today, you should be afraid. You're
Batten
not
down the
safe.
hatches. Yeah. Everybody get guns, you know? I mean,
I so agree with you though, Maureen. That's one of the things I love about you is that I too am a very logical thinker. Like my logical reasoning is probably my strongest communication skill. And I love it to be linear, a thread that I can follow that takes me someplace or doesn't, you know, in a sort of a logical fashion. But this guy is so, it's almost like ADD on steroids. He's like all over the place. He says something, then he reverses it, then he dials it back a little, then he contradicts that, then he does something that undermines all of it. And in the end, I have no idea about anything, which is why we finished this whole hour plus today. We don't actually have a leading theory right now amongst us on whether it was an intruder, it was a real kidnapper, it was a family member, or it was some random, you know, passerby or like a thief who.
Yeah, so I mean that's a good point as well because like we're not really getting any kind of sense of direction on what to think from him, right? And that's why it's a little bit weird for him to say we have our theories and other people have theirs. Like his theories should be superior because they're supposed to have access to the evidence. They're not supposed to just have theories like the rest of us where, you know, this is what we think. They should be like saying this is what the evidence is showing. So yeah, that it shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case that people are thinking, oh, when is the sheriff going to change his mind?
Who went in there, or never mind Mexican drug cartel. It's like we all have like a general like, hey, if you just want to ask me over a cocktail what I think happened, I'll tell you. But you can't really build a case for anything right now because nothing real has been shared by this guy.
no, but I'm taking great solace in the fact that the investigators are outstanding. They're working together. They're just doing, the trial is going to be epic. This person's going to get caught. I'm not sure if we're ever going to get Nancy back. I have to tell you, I'm losing faith on that, and that absolutely breaks my heart. But this person is going to get caught. They are going to get charged, and the trial is going to be epic. And we're going to see that this person that thinks they're so smart really wasn't that smart, just like all the others. And they're going to get taken down.
Mhm.
So
My team is not, they're trying to figure out how old Annie and Tommaso's son is, and it's unclear, but we think he was around 7.5 in December of 2020. So if that's true, here we are, 6 years after that, and he'd be around 13 or early teens, but we don't know for sure. We're just looking at pictures, and he appears to be a little older than Savannah's daughter, who's 11. So that would track maybe early teens. In any event, that just to answer our question from before.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's
yeah.
right.
So,
I forgot he
but
was
to
in
your
that
point,
photo.
Fitz, of an age where you would be more than capable of speaking to what you had seen and witnessed with your grandma in your house that last night and any other details. And maybe they did speak to him, and maybe that's why the cops were back there photographing the inside of that house at 10:30 at night. As Maureen pointed out when we talked about it, the very same time that Nancy would have been inside the home, you know, just before she
This is
went missing.
live.
All right. So
Well, no,
to sum up, we know very little.
So we're live. I'm live, but Megyn Kelly's not live. We're rewatching part of the Megyn Kelly investigation series into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Oh, you're new here. Welcome. I'm live. She's not. That's what I mean.
I did think the walkie-talkie piece of this was very interesting, that if that was a walkie-talkie, he has an accomplice. And I do think the blood information is new too, right? Like our blood expert did not think she saw the blood you'd have potentially after a massive wound from like a gunshot or a stabbing, and did think potentially it was the blood falling from a woman who was being forced to or walking quickly, potentially toward a car. There'll be many more questions we need to ask and answer later. Love doing it with the two of you. Fitz, Maureen, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, what did you guys think of that? I know that it has been covered before, but I wanted to go through it as well because I want to go through like the whole thing. So I think that it's probably better to start that at episode 1, even if we have already. Why is it doing that? There we go. Okay, even if we have already looked at it. Thank you so much for subscribing. I am Rosie, the guest host here, and now that you've subscribed, you'll see Mr. EvilleCJ, who's the main attraction of the channel. Soon he's going to be doing his night shows, and we're going to be doing some shows together on the weekends. I am Rosie. Thank you so much for subscribing. All right, so hold on. What is this doing? Okay, well, in the beginning of the show, I asked how many of you guys had looked at Savannah's message for Easter, and some of you guys said no. So I'm gonna play it, and then I don't know how much you guys want to get into it afterwards, but I do want to just make sure that we do share it out. It's very in-depth. It's a very touching message, and it is sad, but I mean there's also a lot of faith and hope in the message. So maybe we'll talk about it afterwards. I'll see what you guys think. I'm just going to post a link for it as well. Title. I'm sorry, I didn't have this ready. There we go. Again, it says that it's the messages are coming through as CJ, but it's not. It's me. It's Rosie. And it's just because I'm doing it through StreamYard. So let me get this ready. It's doing that thing again. I'm so sorry. There we go. There we go. All right, so let's watch this. And I think Savannah was releasing her pain in that Easter message, like a pressure cooker that had to be released to survive. Yeah, and I think, I mean, she's probably under so much more pressure than we understand, just with being in this situation as well as being a public figure. You know, going through something like this is hard enough without so many people watching, right? So that kind of just adds to it. It's not like there's no normal way to go through this situation, but if there were, it would probably not be as a public figure, if that makes sense. But yeah, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you on that. All right. Let me know if you do that as well.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Easter. And Easter is happy. It is flowers and pastels and baby bunnies. It is sunshine and joy and hope. It is rebirth and second chances and new life and fresh starts. It is the most important day of the year for all of us who believe, even more than Christ's birth, more than his death, his resurrection, his second birth into a permanent life. That is what is most crucial to us. His revival and resurrection mean the same for us. We celebrate today the promise of a new life that never ends in death. But standing here today, I have to tell you, there are moments in which that promise seems irretrievably far away, when life itself seems far harder than death. these moments of deep disappointment with God, the feeling of utter abandonment. For most of us, there will come a time in our life when these feelings hold sway. In our tradition, we are taught to take comfort in the fact that our friend, Jesus, in his short life, experienced every single emotion that we humans can feel. That his taking on the form of humanity made him not a distant observer to our pain, but a hands-on experiencer of it. Recently, though, in my own season of trial, I have wondered. I have questioned whether Jesus really ever experienced this particular wound that I feel. This grievous and uniquely cruel injury of not knowing, of uncertainty and confusion, and answers withheld. In those darkest moments, I have thought, bitterly and perhaps irreverently, that I have stumbled upon a feeling that Jesus did not know. After all, don't the gospel stories recount Jesus informing his disciples of his destiny, that he had been sent to die to ultimately be raised up? They didn't get it, but he did.
So I don't necessarily think that she is like comparing her pain, or look, this whole thing is very open to interpretation. It's very philosophical, right? So I think that what she's really getting at is more about, like, no matter how difficult something is, it makes it easier to have some kind of certainty. She said before that she can handle anything, but she wants closure. She wants to know what's going on. So that's more, I feel, what she's getting at with this message is that the worst thing in the world, or one of the worst things in the world can happen to you, which it has to her. And you can handle it much more easily if you just have all of the information that you need, so that you feel like you can sort of see where you're going and navigate this horrible thing that's happened to you. So again, yeah, okay, maybe it is comparative in some way, but I think what she's getting at right now is just, like she said before in her interview, that she is in agony. And I think that agony is coming really more from just not knowing what's going on, much more so than like the straightforward facts of what happened. That's just my opinion. Like, let me know what you guys think. That's what I took from it.
He at least knew his fate. And yes, it grieved him deeply, to the point of shedding tears of blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. But still, he knew the ending. He knew the plan. There would be suffering, but then resurrection. And so I thought, he never suffered this excruciating not knowing. It isn't wrong to think such thoughts, to challenge our God with questions. God does not ask us to be stoics, with standards of pain with Zen-like remove, or shallow sloganeering about the hard battle God gives to his toughest soldiers. Our questions to God, our wrestling with God, this is his opportunity. For through our authenticity and vulnerability comes a portal of revelation, the imparting of truth and wisdom. And so it went for me, this portal opening as I stared at yet another incongruently luminous desert sunset amidst my spirit's utter darkness. Suddenly, I remembered the grave. I remembered 3 days in the grave. No one talks much about that. We focus mostly on Easter. Of course we do. We cut to the happy ending and the joy of Sunday morning. And yes, we do observe the Friday before, the agony of crucifixion. We mourn by candlelight that darkest night. But after Jesus died, after he breathed his last, what did he actually know? On the cross, he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That is the anguished cry of someone who does not know the answers.
I'm not like making a comment on whether I do or don't agree with anything that she's being said. I'm just trying to like kind of decipher what I think she means with all of this. That's all that I'm saying. Yeah. So that's what she's putting out, and that's what she's going through. It's definitely complicated, but it is put together very well, is what I'm saying. And I think what she's trying to communicate is just how much worse she's feeling by the fact that she doesn't have answers, even though this terrible thing has happened. But she's saying that her anguish comes from just the fact that she doesn't know what's going on. That's my interpretation of what I think she's putting out there. There's probably a lot of layers to this that I'm missing. So let me know more about what you think she's trying to communicate with this. But yeah, that's what I think, without any comment on whether that's right or wrong.
Where did his soul and his spirit go in those days in between? And what was he thinking? Did he think his time in the grave would be a day or two or 1,000 years? In the grave, does his agony seem indefinite to him? That torment of uncertainty, the way indefinite pain can feel eternal? Perhaps he did know this feeling after all. As humans living on this earth now, we are all suspended in that moment of uncertainty. Not 3 days, but thousands of years between his cross and our resurrection with him. Our faith gives us a spiritual conviction that we will be reborn, that God will redeem this pain, that every tear will be wiped away, that our Easter is coming.
Yeah, it's fair.
But we live viscerally in the meantime of feeling unsure, lost, abandoned, disappointed, enraged, forgotten. Our comfort is that our God has felt those feelings from a perspective of humanity, that he has compassion on us, and that he promises, if not immediate answers, his sweet presence. He promises closeness to the brokenhearted.
Yeah, look, it's not it's a very sensitive topic. It's something that a lot of people are going to have different thoughts on, I guess, because everybody has their own personal view of what she's saying, and it's not something that's so straightforward. So I know that some people are going to see it differently. And I think when it comes to something that is this sensitive and this personal, there's very few right or wrong ways to see it, because it's about your own relationship with it. I don't know if that made sense. I don't know if that made sense at all. Maybe it didn't. Let me just carry on.
Somehow, miraculously, his loving and gentle presence that makes the mean time less mean. Perhaps this is too dark a message to share on Easter morning. But I have long believed that we miss out on fully celebrating resurrection if we do not acknowledge the feelings of loss, pain, and yes, death. It is the darkness that makes this morning's light so magnificent, so blindingly beautiful. It is all the brighter because it is so desperately needed. So I close my eyes this morning and I feel the sunshine. I see a bright vision of the day when heaven and earth pass away because they are one on earth as it is in heaven. When we celebrate today, this is what we celebrate. And I celebrate too. I still believe. And so I say with conviction, Happy Easter.
Yeah, it is very sensitive. It just, I guess, kind of speaks to what she's going through at the moment. Why is it doing that? Oh dear. Okay, hold on. There we go. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, look, I understand what you guys are saying. I think that it's as I said, it's something that's really personal. You can't always know how other people are going to respond and all of that. So, I don't know. I thought that it was still interesting though, like just to see where she's at this point. Obviously, I don't think that there's any doubt that the things that she's saying are about the situation that she's in and are about what's going on with her mom and her life right now. So yeah, that kind of makes sense in a way. What do you guys think? Yeah, nobody knows. Nobody knows how she's feeling. Nobody knows how anybody's feeling, I guess. So that it is that complicated, but she's trying her best. Ultimately, whether anybody agrees or disagrees with what she's saying, you have to feel for the situation that she's in. Like, it must be excruciating. I can't imagine being in that position for any members of the family. There we go. All right, so what do you guys think? What do you guys think of that? What did you think of the Megyn Kelly stuff? Let me know. And if you want, you can just leave a comment as well. Okay, I'm pretty much exactly at 2 hours, which was the plan for today. So I just wanted to thank you guys so much for joining today, and I will see you soon. I think you will probably see CJ before you see me again. I might be on the show, I might not, I don't know. But I really appreciate you guys, and thank you. Thanks again.